Admiral Park Seung-won stood on the command deck of the human flagship Terra's Revenge, watching the burning remains of the Vorthak homeworld through the main screen. Vorthalia, the crystal planet that had been the center of the Empire for 10,000 years, was now a broken shell floating in space. The battle had lasted only 6 hours. The Vorthak defenders had tried to fight, but their own hacked systems had turned against them. Their orbital platforms had fired on their own cities. Their ships had attacked each other. In the end, human forces had simply walked in and finished what the Vorthak had started themselves. "Sir," reported Communications Officer Kim Dong-yun, "we're receiving surrender messages from 43 different Vorthak commanders across the galaxy." Admiral Park nodded, but his expression remained cold. "Send the same reply to all of them. The time for surrender has passed." Behind him, Major Oh Yunho stepped forward. He was a tall, quiet man who commanded the Special Forces units that had been hunting Vorthak survivors for the past 3 months. His teams were trained specifically for one purpose: to find and eliminate every remaining member of the crystalline race. "Admiral, my scouts report large groups of Vorthak fleeing toward the outer rim. They're abandoning their remaining ships and trying to hide on remote planets. How many are we tracking? Maybe 50,000 survivors across 12 systems. They're scattered and desperate." Admiral Park turned from the screen and looked at Major O. "Then we hunt them all down, every single one." This was humanity's new mission. The war was no longer about defense or even conquest. It had become something darker. The humans had decided that the Vorthak Empire would not just be defeated. It would be completely erased from existence. Dr. Lim Chae-young worked in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Darwin's Edge. Around her, shelves held samples of Vorthak tissue and captured technology. She had been studying the aliens for over a year now, not to understand them, but to find better ways to kill them. Her latest creation sat in a sealed container on her workbench. It looked like ordinary water, but it was actually a biological weapon designed specifically for Vorthak physiology. The crystalline beings could heal from almost any wound, but this weapon turned their own healing process against them. "Computer, begin test sequence 7, she said, on the screen. She watched as a small sample of Vorthak tissue was exposed to her weapon. The crystal structure began to heal itself just as it normally would. But instead of fixing the damage, the healing process went wrong. The crystals grew too fast in the wrong directions until they collapsed under their own weight. Dr. Lim smiled. This would work perfectly. On a frozen moon in the Vega system, Tekvar huddled in a cave with the last members of his command crew. The mighty war commander who had once led 300 ships now commanded only 12 frightened survivors. His crystalline body was cracked and dim. His burning eyes had faded to barely glowing embers. "War commander," whispered one of his officers. "The humans found our base on Kepler 7. They killed everyone." Tekvar closed his eyes. Kepler 7 had been one of their last strongholds, hidden in an asteroid field where they thought the humans would never look. But humanity's hunting fleet seemed to be everywhere now. They had ships watching every star system, soldiers searching every planet, weapons that could track Vorthak life signs from incredible distances. "How many of us are left?" he asked. "Maybe 10,000 in the entire galaxy, sir. Maybe less, 10,000, out of an empire that had once numbered in the billions. The humans had not just defeated them. They had nearly wiped them from existence." Tekvar remembered the early days of the war when he had laughed at these primitive creatures. He had thought they were weak and stupid. He had been so very wrong. The humans were not weak. They were the most dangerous predators the galaxy had ever seen. They did not just win battles. They learned from every victory and every defeat. They took the best ideas from their enemies and made them better. They adapted faster than any species had a right to, and now they were hunting his people like animals. Captain Jang Minho led his strike force through the ruins of what had once been a Vorthak mining station. His team wore special armor that could detect crystalline life forms from a distance. Their weapons were loaded with Dr. Lim's biological agents. They had been hunting Vorthak survivors for 6 months now, and they were very good at it. "Movement in Sector 7, reported Sergeant Lee Bowman through the communication system. 3 contacts moving toward the old reactor chamber. Surround them, Captain Jang ordered. Remember, no prisoners. That had been the order from the very beginning of the hunt. No prisoners, no mercy. No negotiations. The Vorthak had shown no mercy when they destroyed human colonies. Now humanity would return the favor. The 3 surviving Vorthak warriors tried to fight, but it was hopeless. They were weak from months of hiding and running. Their weapons were damaged. Their armor was cracked. Against trained human soldiers with advanced equipment, they had no chance. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When it was over, 3 more members of the former master race were dead. "This is Strike Team 7, Captain Zhang reported. Sector 12 is now clear." "Acknowledged," came the reply from Fleet Command. "Proceed to your next assignment." There was always a next assignment. There were always more Vorthak to find. The hunt continued day and night, across every system that had once belonged to the Empire. On Earth, President Shin Wubin addressed the Terran Assembly. The war had made him the leader of the most powerful species in the galaxy, but victory had come at a terrible cost. Billions of humans had died in the fighting. Entire worlds had been destroyed. The price of survival had been enormous. "Today marks 1 year since the fall of Vorthalia," he announced to the gathered representatives. "Our fleets control 47 star systems that once belonged to the Vorthak Empire. Our enemies, who thought they were the apex predators of the galaxy, are now almost extinct." The assembly cheered. But President Shin's expression remained serious. "Let this be a lesson to any species that thinks humanity is weak," he continued. "We did not start this war. We did not choose to become killers. But when forced to fight for our survival, we discovered something about ourselves. We are very, very good at it." In the depths of space, the last major group of Vorthak survivors had gathered on a small asteroid in an empty system far from any star. Supreme War Commander Tekvar, once the proud leader of the Empire's military, now commanded fewer than 3,000 of his people. They had no ships, no weapons, no hope. "War Commander," said his aide, "long-range sensors detect human ships approaching. They will be here in 4 hours." Tekvar looked around at the frightened faces of his people. These were the last survivors of a race that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Soon they would all be dead, and the Vorthak Empire would be nothing but a memory. "Send a message to the approaching fleet," he said quietly. "Tell them we surrender unconditionally. Tell them we will serve them as slaves if they let us live." The message was sent. The reply came back 30 minutes later. "Message received and understood. No prisoners will be taken. Prepare to die." Tekvar closed his eyes and waited for the end. The hunters had found their last prey, and soon the galaxy would have only one apex predator. Humanity had learned the most important lesson of evolution: adapt or die. The Vorthak had forgotten that lesson, and now they would pay the ultimate price for their arrogance. General Cho Hyunwoo stood before the largest war room humanity had ever built. The walls were covered with screens showing every Vorthak system, every enemy fleet position, every human ship ready for battle. 6 months had passed since the victory at Kepler Station, and everything had changed. The sonic frequency weapons were now mounted on every human ship. But that was just the beginning. Human engineers had been busy. They had built new ships designed only for fighting the Vorthak. They had created better armor, faster engines, and weapons that could break crystal hulls from a distance. "Operation Broken Mirror begins in 12 hours, General Cho announced to the room full of officers. "We will attack 17 Vorthak systems at the same time. Our goal is simple: destroy every enemy ship and take every enemy world." Captain Nam Ji-young raised her hand. She was the youngest person in the room, but she had captured 3 Vorthak ships in the last month. "General, what about their reinforcements? They still have more ships than we do." "That's where engineer Song Mi-jin comes in." General Cho smiled and nodded to a woman sitting at a computer terminal. Song Mi-jin stood up and activated a holographic display. It showed the inside of a Vorthak command ship, with crystalline beings working at their stations. "For the past 4 months, I've been studying captured Vorthak technology," she said. "Their computer systems are incredibly advanced, but they have one major weakness. They haven't changed their security codes in over 1,000 years." Murmurs of surprise filled the room. Song Mi-jin continued. "The Vorthak are so confident in their power that they never thought anyone would be able to hack their systems. Their passwords are simple, their firewalls are old, and their backup systems are completely open. I can take control of any Vorthak ship within 30 minutes. Admiral Park Sung-hwan, who had replaced Admiral Kang as fleet commander, leaned forward. "You mean we can turn their own ships against them?" Better than that, Song Mijin grinned. I can turn their automated defense platforms, their orbital weapons, even their life support systems against them. When we attack tomorrow, half the Vorthak fleet will be fighting the other half. On the Vorthak homeworld of Vorthalia, Elder Council Master Vexthon stood in the great crystal chamber where the Empire's leaders met. The chamber was filled with worried voices, something that had not happened in thousands of years. The humans have taken 4 more systems, reported War Commander Kethavan. They destroyed our fleets at Proxima, Rigel, and Centauri. Our losses are now over 200 ships. Vexathon's crystalline body glowed with angry red light. How is this possible? They are primitive creatures with simple weapons. They are not simple anymore, said another officer. They learn from every battle. Every ship they capture, they study. Every weapon we use, they find a counter for. They adapt faster than any species we have ever encountered. War Commander Thekvar, who had survived the battle at Kepler Station, stood at the back of the chamber. His body showed cracks from battles with human ships, and his glow was dimmer than before. Council Master, I have fought these humans 6 times now. Each time they are different. Each time they have new weapons and new tactics. They do not fight like any enemy we have known. What do you suggest? Vexthon asked. We must stop treating this as a normal conquest. The humans are not like the other species we have destroyed. They are changing the rules of war. Meanwhile, in human space, the largest fleet ever assembled was preparing to attack. 300 ships had been built in the past 6 months, all designed specifically for fighting the Vorthak. They carried sonic disruptors, crystal-breaking missiles, and hacking equipment that could take control of enemy systems. Captain Nam Ji-young stood on the bridge of her ship, the Incheon strike. Around her, the crew prepared for battle. These were not the same scared humans who had hidden behind asteroids 6 months ago. These were warriors who had learned to hunt the galaxy's former apex predators. All ships, begin the attack, came General Cho's voice over the communication system. What happened next changed the galaxy forever. Human fleets appeared in 17 different Vorthak systems at exactly the same time. But they were not alone. As soon as the battles began, Song Mijin's hacking programs activated. Vorthak defense platforms turned their weapons on Vorthak ships. Automated fighters began attacking their own bases. Even the life support systems on enemy vessels started shutting down, forcing the crystalline warriors to fight in vacuum conditions. In the Altair system, Captain Nam Ji-young watched as a massive Vorthak dreadnought simply stopped moving. Its lights went out, its weapons powered down, and its engines died. Engineer Song's hack worked perfectly, reported her communications officer. The ship's computer thinks it's under attack by Vorthak rebels. It shut down all systems to prevent capture. Nam Ji-young smiled. Move us into position. Let's add that dreadnought to our fleet. This was the new human strategy. They did not just destroy Vorthak ships anymore. They captured them. They studied them. They improved them. Within hours of taking a Vorthak vessel, human engineers would have it working better than it ever had before. The battles raged for 3 days. When they were over, the Vorthak Empire had lost half of its remaining fleet. But worse than that, they had lost something more important. They had lost their confidence. For 10,000 years, the Vorthak had believed they were the strongest beings in the galaxy. They had never needed to innovate or improve because strength had always been enough. But now they faced an enemy that grew stronger with each defeat. On Vorthalia, the crystal chamber was filled with panic. Reports came in of system after system falling to human forces. Entire fleets were switching sides as their computers were hacked. Worlds that had been Vorthak for thousands of years were now flying human flags. We must negotiate, said one of the council members. Perhaps we can reach an agreement with these humans. Vexathon's body flashed with angry light. The Vorthak Empire does not negotiate with inferior species. Then, what do you call what is happening to us? Thekvar stepped forward. Elder Council Master, I have seen what these humans can do. They do not just defeat us, they learn from us. Every battle makes them stronger and us weaker. You sound like you are afraid of them. I am afraid of them. Tekvar said quietly. And you should be too. The council chamber fell silent. No, Vorthak had ever admitted to being afraid of another species. It was not something their kind did. But as they looked at the tactical displays showing human fleets advancing deeper into their territory, many of them felt something they had never experienced before. Fear. Captain Nam Ji-young stood in the captured Vorthak dreadnought, watching human engineers install new weapons and systems. The ship was 3 times larger than any vessel humanity had built. But in human hands, it was becoming something far more dangerous than it had ever been as a Vorthak ship. "Captain," called one of the engineers, "we've finished installing the new sonic array. This ship can now shatter an entire Vorthak fleet from long range." Nam Ji-young nodded. Around her, dozens of captured Vorthak vessels were being converted the same way. Soon, the humans would have a fleet that was not just equal to the Vorthak Empire, but superior to it. The hunters had become the hunted, and the former apex predators were learning what it felt like to be prey. In the depths of space, General Cho's voice reached every human ship. Phase 2 of Operation Broken Mirror begins tomorrow. Target: the Vorthak homeworld itself. The war was far from over, but the galaxy could already see how it would end. The empire that had ruled for 10,000 years was crumbling, and humanity was rising to take its place. Captain Lee Taman gripped the arms of his command chair as the battlecruiser Soul's Pride shook under enemy fire. Through the main screen, he could see the massive Vorthak ships floating in space like dark mountains. Their weapons flashed with deadly light, and each shot could destroy a human ship completely. "Shields down to 30%, shouted his weapons officer. "We can't take much more of this." Around them, other human ships were dying. The enemy had found them at Kepler Station, just as Admiral Kang had expected. This was humanity's first real battle against the Vorthak Empire, and it was not going well. "All ships fall back to position Beta," Lee Taman ordered into his communicator. "Use the asteroid field for cover." The surviving human ships moved behind the large rocks that floated near the station. It would not protect them for long, but it might give them a few more minutes to live. On the Vorthak flagship, Tekvar watched the human ships hide behind the asteroids. His officers were already preparing to blast the rocks apart, but he held up one of his crystalline hands. "Wait," he said. "Let us see what these creatures do when they think they are safe." Dr. Kim Soo-young was not thinking about safety. She was thinking about the dead Vorthak warrior floating outside her laboratory window. It had been killed 2 days ago, when a damaged human ship had crashed into a Vorthak boarding party. The alien's body had been pulled into space, and somehow it had drifted here to the research station. She had been studying it for 18 hours straight. Every other scientist said she was wasting time. The Vorthak were about to destroy them all. Why spend their last hours looking at a dead enemy? But Kim Soo-young had always been curious about everything. Even facing death, she wanted to understand how these aliens worked. Their bodies looked like living glass, but they moved like flesh. They could heal from terrible wounds, but this one was definitely dead. She ran another scan with her equipment. The readings made her stop and look again. There was something strange about the way the alien's body was put together. The crystal structure was not random. It followed a pattern, like the inside of a computer chip. "Computer, analyze the harmonic frequency of this crystal matrix," she said. The computer worked for several minutes, then displayed the results. Kim Soo-young stared at the screen. Then she started to smile. Back on Soul's Pride, the situation was getting worse. More human ships had been destroyed, and the Vorthak were starting to move around the asteroid field. Soon there would be nowhere left to hide. Lee Taman's communicator buzzed. It was Dr. Kim Soo-young from the research station. "Captain, I need you to listen very carefully. I think I found something important. Doctor, we're kind of busy getting shot at right now. That's exactly why you need to hear this. The Vorthak bodies are made of crystalline structures. Crystals can be shattered if you hit them with the right frequency of sound." Lee Taman frowned. "Sound? Doctor, we're fighting in space. There's no sound in space. Not sound waves through air. But we can generate sonic pulses through their ship hulls through physical contact. Captain, if I'm right, we might be able to hurt them." Lee Taman looked at his tactical display. They had maybe 10 minutes before the Vorthak finished surrounding them. It was crazy, but crazy was better than nothing. "What do you need?" "Give me access to your main communication array. I can modify it to generate the frequency I calculated." Lee Taemin nodded to his communications officer. Within minutes, Dr. Kim Soo-young was working through their computer systems, changing the ship's communication equipment into something completely different. The Vorthak ships were almost in position to finish the human fleet when something strange happened. One of the human ships, Soul's Pride, suddenly shot forward from behind the asteroids. Instead of firing its weapons, it rammed straight into the side of a Vorthak cruiser. Dekvar made his glass-breaking laugh. The humans have gone insane. They are trying to ram us with their tiny ships. But then something happened that had never happened before in the 10,000-year history of the Vorthak Empire. The ship that Soul's Pride had rammed began to shake. The black crystal hull started to crack. And then, with a sound like a mountain breaking, the entire Vorthak cruiser shattered into a million pieces. The Vorthak fleet stopped moving. For the first time in their history, they had watched one of their ships be destroyed by an enemy that was not another Vorthak. On Soul's Pride, Lee Taemin and his crew stared at their screens in amazement. It had worked. The sonic pulse had traveled through the collision point and somehow broken the enemy ship apart from the inside. "All ships," Lee Taemin broadcast, "ram the enemy vessels. Dr. Kim's frequency weapon works, but you have to make physical contact." What followed was the strangest space battle anyone had ever seen. Human ships, much smaller than their enemies, shot forward like bullets to crash into the Vorthak vessels. Each collision resulted in another enemy ship breaking apart like glass. The Vorthak tried to shoot down the ramming ships, but the humans were moving too fast and coming from too many directions. Ship after ship of the mighty empire cracked and died. Commander Yoon Dae-hyun led the charge in his destroyer Braveheart. He had lost his wife and children when New Busan was destroyed. Now he flew his ship directly at a Vorthak battleship, his sonic equipment screaming at the frequency Dr. Kim had discovered. The impact crushed the front of Braveheart, but the Vorthak ship simply fell apart. Yoon Dae-hyun and his crew died, but they took 300 Vorthak warriors with them. On the Vorthak flagship, panic was spreading like a disease. Officers who had never known fear were backing away from their control stations. Warriors who had conquered 100 worlds were asking if they should retreat. Dekvar could not understand what was happening. His ships were invincible. His warriors were unstoppable. How could these weak creatures be destroying them? "War Commander," said one of his officers, "we have lost 12 ships. The humans are using some kind of weapon we don't understand." "Impossible. Our armor cannot be broken by primitive technology." "Then how do you explain what we are seeing?" Dekvar had no answer. For the first time in his long life, he was afraid. The battle lasted 3 more hours. When it was over, the Vorthak fleet was retreating. They had lost 22 ships. The humans had lost most of their fleet too, but they had proven something important. The Vorthak could be killed. Dr. Kim Soo-young's discovery spread through human space faster than light. Every research station, every shipyard, every military base began working on the same thing: how to build better sonic weapons, how to make the frequency stronger, how to kill more Vorthak. On Earth, Admiral Kang received the battle reports with a mixture of sadness and hope. They had lost good people at Kepler Station, but they had learned something the galaxy had never known. The mighty Vorthak Empire was not as strong as everyone thought. Dekvar stood in his damaged command center, looking at the reports from the battle. 22 ships lost to creatures he had thought were no threat at all. His officers were asking what to do next. For 10,000 years, the Vorthak had won every battle by being stronger and tougher than their enemies. They had never needed to be smart because strength had always been enough. But these humans were different. They learned from failure. They adapted to new situations. They took his greatest strength and found a way to turn it into weakness. Dekvar realized he was facing something the Vorthak Empire had never encountered before: an enemy that could change. The alarm bells screamed through the corridors of Terra Station. Admiral Kang Min-soo ran toward the command center, his boots hitting the metal floor with sharp sounds. Officers rushed past him, their faces showing the same fear he felt in his chest. Something big was coming. The main screen showed empty space, but the sensors told a different story. Hundreds of ships moved through the darkness between stars. Ships bigger than anything humans had ever built. Ships that belonged to the Vorthak Empire. Park Ji-won stood at her console, her fingers dancing over the controls. She was the best intelligence officer in the fleet, and right now her face was pale. She looked up when the admiral arrived. Sir, we have confirmation. It's them. The Vorthak are coming. The command center fell silent. Every person there knew what this meant. For 10,000 years, the Vorthak had ruled the galaxy. No one had ever beaten them. No one had even tried to fight them and lived to tell about it. Admiral Kang looked at the data streaming across the screens. The enemy fleet was massive. Each ship was the size of a small city. Their weapons could turn planets into dust. Their warriors could heal from any wound and walk through solid walls. How long until they reach our outer colonies? He asked. 18 hours, sir. Maybe less. On the other side of the galaxy, Supreme War Commander Thekvar stood in the control room of his flagship. The ship was called Dominion's Edge, and it was 3 miles long. Like all Vorthak, Thekvar was 12 feet tall. His body looked like it was made of black glass, and red light glowed from inside him. His eyes burned like tiny suns. Around him, other Vorthak officers worked at their stations. They moved slowly without worry. Why should they hurry? They had conquered 47 star systems. They had destroyed 100 different alien races. These new creatures called humans would be just as easy. Thekvar studied the pictures of human settlements on his screen. The buildings looked weak. The people looked soft and small. Their weapons used simple bullets and explosives. How could such weak things think they could stand against the Vorthak Empire? War Commander, said one of his officers, the scouts report that humans have only 12 worlds. Their largest ships are smaller than our escort vessels. Thekvar made a sound like breaking glass, which was how the Vorthak laughed. 12 worlds? Our advanced ships alone outnumber their entire fleet. This will be over before it begins. He turned to look out at the stars. Behind his ship, 300 Vorthak vessels followed in perfect formation. Each one carried weapons that could crack a moon in half. Each one held warriors who had never known defeat. Send the usual message, Thekvar ordered. Surrender now and serve the Empire or be destroyed. Back on Terra Station, the message arrived exactly as expected. Admiral Kang read it twice, then looked around the room at his officers. Some of them were young, fresh from the academy. Others had gray hair and scars from battles with pirates and rebels. None of them had ever faced anything like this. What are our options? Asked Captain Lee Taman, the youngest ship commander in the fleet. Park Ji-won pulled up tactical displays. We have 87 combat ships. The largest is the battlecruiser Soul's Pride. Our best weapons are railguns and nuclear missiles. And they have 300 ships, each one bigger than our flagship. Energy weapons that work like nothing we understand. Armor that our missiles can't scratch. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Everyone was thinking the same thing. This was not a war they could win. This was not even a fight they could survive. But Admiral Kang had not become the head of the Terran Defense Fleet by giving up. He walked to the main screen and stared at the approaching enemy fleet. Send messages to all colonies. Begin evacuation procedures immediately. Get every civilian ship moving toward the core worlds. Sir, said Lee Taman, what about our response to their surrender demand? Admiral Kang smiled, but it was not a happy smile. Tell them that humanity does not surrender. Tell them that if they want our worlds, they will have to take them. The message went out across space at light speed. When it reached the Vorthak fleet, Thekvar read it and made his glass-breaking laugh again. Brave little creatures, he said, but bravery without power is just another word for stupidity. He gave the order to attack. The first human colony to fall was New Busan. It was a mining world with 2 million people. The Vorthak ships appeared in the sky like dark clouds. They did not bother to land troops. They simply fired their energy weapons from orbit. The planet's surface turned to glass in minutes. Every building, every person, every living thing was gone. Only smooth black glass remained where a world had been. The news reached Terra Station 6 hours later. Admiral Kang watched the recording sent by the last escape ship to leave New Busan. The Vorthak weapons did not explode like human bombs. They simply erased everything they touched. How many got out? He asked. Maybe 50,000, Park Ji-won answered. Out of 2 million. Terra Nova fell next. Then the research station at Kepler Point. Each attack was the same. The Vorthak ships would arrive, destroy everything, and move on. They did not take prisoners. They did not steal resources. They simply erased human presence from each world. Admiral Kang stood in his office looking out at the stars. His aide, Lieutenant Song Mi-jin, brought him coffee, but he did not drink it. Sir, the fleet commanders are asking for orders. Tell them to fall back to the Tau Ceti system. We need time to study these recordings. Study them for what, sir? Admiral Kang turned from the window. His eyes were hard, but there was something else there too, something that looked like determination. Everything has a weakness, Lieutenant. Everything. The Vorthak have ruled for 10,000 years because no one has been smart enough to find theirs, but maybe no one has tried hard enough. The Vorthak fleet continued its advance. Tekvar was pleased with how quickly things were going. These humans died just as easily as all the others. Soon their core worlds would burn, and the Vorthak Empire would add another conquered species to its long list. But something nagged at the war commander's mind. The human ships had not tried to fight. They had simply run away. In 10,000 years of conquest, no species had ever run from the first battle. They always tried to fight even when they knew they would lose. Perhaps these humans were even weaker than he thought. Or perhaps they were planning something. Tekvar dismissed the thought. What could such primitive creatures plan that would matter against the might of the Vorthak Empire? He would learn the answer to that question soon enough. Sergeant First Class Ko Hijin crouched behind a broken wall on the barren moon of Omega-7. Her rifle was aimed at the last Vorthak in the galaxy. The crystalline being sat alone in the ruins of what had once been an ancient temple, his body cracked and barely glowing. This was Tekvar, the former supreme war commander of the Vorthak Empire. The being who had once commanded 300 warships was now just a broken refugee waiting to die. His people were gone. His empire was ash. He was the final remnant of a species that had ruled for 10,000 years. Target confirmed. Ko Hyejin spoke into her communicator. This is the last one. Take the shot, came the reply from Captain Jang Minho. Ko Hyejin looked through her rifle scope at the alien who had started this war. Tekvar was not fighting. He was not trying to hide. He simply sat there waiting for the end. His species had been completely eliminated in just 2 years. Not a single Vorthak remained anywhere in the galaxy except for him. Ko Hyejin pulled the trigger. The simple kinetic bullet, the same primitive technology the Vorthak had once mocked, punched through Tekvar's crystalline skull. The last member of the former master race fell over and stopped glowing. Target eliminated, Ko Hyejin reported. The Vorthak Empire is officially extinct. Across the galaxy, human communication networks carried the news. The species that had terrorized countless worlds for 10 millennia was gone forever, not conquered, not enslaved, completely erased from existence. On Earth, President Shin Wubin stood before the largest gathering in human history. Representatives from every human world, every allied species, and every former Vorthak territory had come to witness this moment. The great plaza outside the Terran Assembly Building was filled with billions of beings, all watching as their new leader addressed the galaxy. Today, we mark the end of the Vorthak Empire, President Shin announced. 2 years ago, they came to our worlds believing we were weak. They thought our technology was primitive. They assumed we would be easy to conquer. The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. They were wrong about everything. We were not weak. We were not primitive. And we were definitely not easy to conquer. Instead, we showed them what happens when you underestimate humanity. Cheers erupted from the crowd, but President Shin held up his hand for silence. The galaxy has a new order now. The Vorthak ruled through fear and strength, but strength without wisdom is useless. They learned that lesson too late. Fleet Admiral Yoon Sumin stood on the bridge of the flagship Eternal Victory, watching as human ships distributed former Vorthak territories to allied species. The Zephyrians received 12 systems that had been taken from them centuries ago. The Altarian Republic got back their ancestral homeworld. The peaceful Centauri Federation was given rich mining worlds to help them rebuild. Humanity kept the best systems for themselves, of course. But they shared enough to show the galaxy that the new rulers were different from the old ones. The Vorthak had taken everything and given nothing back. Humans took what they needed and shared what they could spare. Admiral, reported her communications officer, the Zephyrian ambassador wants to thank us again for returning their worlds. Tell them they're welcome, Admiral Yoon replied. And remind them that we expect their support if any other species decides to threaten the peace. The message was clear. Humanity was generous to its friends, but absolutely ruthless to its enemies. The galaxy had seen what happened to those who chose to be enemies of Earth. Dr. Baek Jinsu worked in his laboratory on the research station that orbited the ruins of Vorthalia. He was writing the final chapter of his book about the Vorthak extinction. Future generations would read this book to understand how the galaxy's former apex predators had been completely destroyed by a species they thought was inferior, the Vorthak made a fundamental error, he wrote. They believed that physical strength was the only form of power that mattered. They ruled through fear and violence for 10,000 years, never realizing that these methods would eventually fail them. He paused and looked out at the broken planet below. Vorthalia was now a mining world, with human machines extracting valuable crystals from the ruins of the former capital. The crystal that had once formed Vorthak bodies was now used to build human technology. Humanity succeeded where the Vorthak failed because we understood a simple truth, Dr. Bike continued writing. Evolution never stops. The species that survives is not the strongest or the largest. It is the one that adapts the fastest to changing conditions. He saved his work and transmitted it to publishers across human space. Within hours, his book would be available on every human world and allied planet. The story of the Vorthak extinction would become required reading in schools, universities, and military academies. On the former Vorthak world of Kepler Prime, now renamed New Sol, human colonists were building cities where crystalline monuments had once stood. Children played in parks built on the sites of ancient Vorthak temples. The planet that had been a stronghold of the Empire for thousands of years was now just another human world. Captain Nam Jiung, now promoted to admiral, walked through the main street of the capital city. Around her, humans and alien allies worked together to build a new civilization. The galaxy was at peace for the first time in millennia, but it was a peace enforced by human strength. Admiral, called her aide, Lieutenant Park Minhyuk, the memorial is ready for your inspection. They walked to the center of the city, where a simple black stone monument had been erected. The inscription was written in human letters, but it was translated into every language in the galaxy. To the Vorthak Empire, once considered alpha, evolution disagreed. Below that, a longer inscription read, "For 10,000 years." The Vorthak believed they were the ultimate predators. They conquered hundreds of worlds and destroyed countless species. They thought strength alone was enough to rule the galaxy forever. They learned too late that the universe belongs to those who can adapt, not those who can dominate. Admiral Nam nodded approvingly. The memorial would stand for thousands of years, reminding future generations of what happened to species that stopped evolving. Across the galaxy, similar monuments were being built on every former Vorthak world. Each one carried the same message: adapt or die, learn or be destroyed. Evolution never stops, and the galaxy belongs to those who understand that truth. The Vorthak Empire was dead, but its extinction had taught the galaxy an important lesson. Physical strength was temporary. Technology could be copied, but the ability to learn, to adapt, to become something better than you were before, that was the real source of power in the universe. Humanity had proven that they possessed this power in greater measure than any species before them. They had taken the galaxy's most advanced technology and improved it. They had faced the universe's most feared warriors and defeated them. They had inherited an empire and made it better than it had ever been. In the depths of space, human ships patrolled trade routes that had once been terrorized by Vorthak raiders. On distant worlds, human scientists worked to understand alien technologies that could benefit all species. In the halls of government, human leaders made decisions that affected trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. The galaxy had a new apex predator, and unlike the Vorthak, humanity understood that being apex meant having responsibilities as well as power. They protected the weak, punished the aggressive, and ensured that no single species would ever again threaten the peace of civilized space. The age of the Vorthak was over. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy was learning that evolution had chosen its champions well. The hunters had become the apex predators, and they intended to stay that way forever.